Harrison's trial wasn't just about smuggling cash and washing dirty money anymore. It had taken a sharp turn no one saw coming. The courtroom was buzzing, cameras were flashing, and people across the country were glued to every update. Then witness number 27 stepped up, and jaws dropped. She was young, unfamiliar, and her name had never been linked to Rick or any of his famous shows. Her intro was short, but it stopped everyone cold. "I'm his adopted daughter," she said. Silence hit like a punch, and then she dropped a bomb. "They took turns on me." Just 5 words, but those 5 words set the whole place on fire. The illusion that Rick had built over years, on TV, in interviews, in the hearts of fans, crumbled in seconds. All those polished smiles, the so-called family man image, gone. No one ever guessed he had an adopted daughter hidden from the spotlight for more than 10 years. And she didn't come asking for sympathy. She came ready to expose what she called years of manipulation, control, and chilling silence. Was this the truth? Or a twist so wild it blurred the lines between drama and destruction? Either way, the media circus had just exploded with a new center act. Part 1. The TV boss who built an empire. Rick Harrison was once seen as the king of reality TV. A regular guy with blue-collar roots who turned a struggling pawn shop in Vegas into a multi-million-dollar empire. He wasn't just a businessman, he was America's guy. The one everyone trusted on screen. But now, that trust was cracking fast. For over 10 years, Rick Harrison raked in serious dollars. People didn't just tune in to Pawn Stars for the weird antiques, they tuned in for him. That half smirk, that smooth talk, that vibe like he knew every trick in the book. When the show first dropped in 2009 on the History Channel, it didn't just take off, it blew up. The setup was simple. People rolled into the gold and silver pawn shop with oddball or pricey items. Rick and his crew, mostly family, would check them out, haggle like pros, and maybe buy. But the magic? It wasn't the stuff. They were selling themselves. Viewers fell in love with the whole Harrison clan. Rick and his dad, Richard Old Man Harrison, were like a clash of generations. The old-school vet with no-nonsense vibes versus Rick's cool and calculated moves. Then came Corey, Rick's son, young, fiery, always questioning the rules, but ride or die loyal to the family hustle. Together, they weren't just dealing in collectibles. They were building a TV dynasty. At the center of it all stood Rick. He was the brand. But behind the cameras, he ran a tight ship. Rick didn't just show up and smile. He made the calls. He demanded to see every episode before it aired. If something didn't sit right or made the family look off, it got cut. Period. He made sure the show stayed clean, heartwarming, and proudly American, like the image he fought to protect at all costs. The media played right along. In every interview, Rick showed up as the funny, slightly sarcastic guy who always stayed on the right side of the line. Every article, every talk show, every spotlight moment worked like a shield, protecting him from suspicion, even as quiet whispers in the industry hinted that off-camera Rick wasn't nearly as charming as he looked on screen. But no one pushed for answers. Why would they? Rick was a cash machine. He kept the ratings high and the networks happy. Still, if you looked closely, there was something missing in the perfect family picture he paraded around. A strange emptiness no one ever questioned. There was no daughter, no mention in interviews, no appearances on the show, not even a single blurry photo from a fan event. Rick constantly talked about my son, my dad, my crew, but never once said a word about an adopted daughter. Not a story, not a birthday memory, nothing. At the time, the media brushed it off. Maybe she didn't like the cameras, maybe Rick was just being protective. But looking back now, it wasn't sweet. It wasn't innocent. It was a giant red flag. That empty space wasn't an oversight. It was a cover-up. Turns out, while fans crowned Rick as the ultimate TV dad, the daughter he adopted was locked away from the spotlight and from the world. During the trial, shocking details came out. Rick had cameras set up inside his own house. His adopted daughter was homeschooled, kept isolated, no friends, no visitors, no door she could even lock. And in all those years, not a single family photo showed her standing next to him. Suddenly, a whole different Rick Harrison came into focus. Not the fan favorite, not the lovable boss, but someone who used fame like a mask, hiding the truth behind scripted smiles and perfectly edited episodes. For years, people believed this girl didn't even exist. And if anyone did know about her, they just assumed she was part of Rick Harrison's private life. Off limits, not to be questioned. The media treated it like sacred ground, painting Rick as some noble foster dad doing a good deed. But when that courtroom lit up, it became clear. This silence wasn't about love, it was all about control. Her real name? Never once mentioned on TV, not a single article, not a single photo. She was invisible. But court records and her voice in front of that jury finally brought her into the light. She was born in 2001 in San Bernardino, California. Her start in life was hard. Her mother battled addiction and kept cycling in and out of rehab. The court eventually ruled she couldn't care for her child. As for the father, no name, just rumors. Possibly homeless, in and out of jail, barely around. So the girl got swept into the system. Foster homes, shuffled around, never settling in one place. She kept calling strangers mom and dad, never knowing who would stick. At just 10 years old, she ended up in a Las Vegas charity program for underprivileged kids. Rick Harrison was the big-time sponsor of that event, and that's where their paths crossed. He walked into the room and didn't even glance at the other kids, she said in court. He came straight to my corner. I was quiet. I didn't run around for candy like the rest. He looked at me like I was some rare object. And right after that moment, Rick started the process to adopt her. The timeline moved way too fast, and that raised eyebrows. In Nevada, adoptions usually take at least 12 months. There's a whole process: background checks, counseling, supervised home visits. But somehow, Rick Harrison got full custody in just 84 days. No delays, no questions. Why? Because he was Rick Harrison. That name opened doors, skipped steps, and brought a little girl into his world through paperwork, not love. When she first arrived at Rick's big mansion in West Las Vegas, everything looked picture perfect. Her own room, fancy clothes, warm meals, and a rich, famous father who smiled a lot. But it didn't take long before the rules came crashing in. By the end of the first month, she wasn't allowed to leave her room after 8 p.m. She couldn't lock her door, no social media, no unsupervised phone calls. She was homeschooled by a rotating list of tutors, none of whom stuck around for long. No school friends, no outside contact, nothing. She wasn't living in a home. She was trapped in a system built on total control. By age 11, she understood this wasn't family. This was a cage. When asked in court why she never ran, why she didn't speak up sooner, her answer hit hard. "I thought I was lucky," she said. "Every foster kid dreams of a family, and I had a famous father. I thought he loved me." But that so-called affection started feeling off. She talked about strange back rubs, about forehead kisses that happened every night, even when she asked him to stop. Cameras were installed in the hallway for safety, but she didn't feel safe. Not anymore. That same smile Rick wore on TV, it slowly turned into the face of her nightmare. She couldn't even say when the shift happened, when Rick stopped being a foster dad and became something far more disturbing. It crept in slowly. Every move he made was masked as love. He'd whisper things like, "I'm doing this because you're special," or "You deserve everything. Just don't tell anyone." They wouldn't get it. That was the start of it. The isolation, the guilt tripping, the mind games. But what made it worse was who else was there. Corey Harrison, Rick's son, the one fans knew from the show, was around too. She said he didn't speak much, but always watched. And when she broke the rules or pushed back, Corey would get angry. Real angry. One day, Rick told her something that changed everything. You need to learn how to share affection in this family. Your brother and I are one. That was the moment it hit her. She wasn't living as someone's daughter. She was being possessed, treated like something they both owned. What came next was routine. Sick routines. Late-night lessons, she called them. Corey walking into her room without knocking. Hugs that lasted too long. Every time she cried or begged for space, Rick would say, "If you're not grateful, I can send you back. Right back to where I found you." He didn't need to raise his voice. All it took was a reminder of what came before. Foster care, shelters, the streets. That threat alone kept her quiet. "I didn't want to be another number," she wrote in her diary, which was later used in court. "At least here, I was Rick Harrison's daughter, even if that name never really belonged to me." She tried to tell someone. She really did. But whenever a new tutor showed up and she found the courage to speak, she said they looked the other way. Some people saw what was happening, but looked the other way. Why? Because they worked for Rick Harrison, not for the truth, not for their own consciences. In court, she spoke clearly, and when she walked out, the room was frozen. No one had a word. At just 15 years old, she tried to break free. She snuck out through a side door and ran, straight to a police station, begging for help. But just hours later, Rick showed up. Not alone. He brought a high-powered lawyer. He spun a story, said she was an unstable teen, traumatized by her mother's abandonment, too emotionally fragile to be trusted. The police bought every word. They handed her back. This time, the door to her room was locked tighter than ever. But Rick couldn't lock away her memory. He couldn't erase her will. Even trapped, even scared, she refused to be silenced. She wrote down everything. She saved recordings, changed file names, hid memory cards in places no one thought to check. She was collecting evidence piece by piece, waiting for the day she could finally be heard. That day came. She stood on the witness stand, not as a runaway, not as some troubled kid, but as a grown woman, calm, determined. Her voice didn't shake. She looked around the courtroom filled with suits and power and said, "I am the truth you tried to bury alive." Part 3. The trial turns. Las Vegas. Monday morning. Rick Harrison, the face of a beloved TV empire, walked into week 3 of his federal trial for smuggling and laundering money tied to shady antiquities deals. Then it happened. A female witness took the stand. The courtroom stirred. It was her, his legally adopted daughter. And this time, she wasn't silent. She came to the stand and dropped a bombshell, accusing both Rick and Corey Harrison of long-term abuse that stretched over years. At first, no one thought much of witness number 27. She walked up quietly, calm, barely making a ripple. Her identity was confirmed by the prosecution, but kept private from the public due to the weight of what she was about to reveal. Then she was given the floor. She turned to Rick, locked eyes with him, and said 5 words that froze the room. "They took turns on me." You could feel the shock. Reporters stopped writing. Spectators sat in stunned silence. The courtroom air got heavy, fast. Rick's defense team jumped to their feet, begging the judge for a recess, claiming this testimony had nothing to do with money laundering or smuggling. But the judge shut that down. Motion denied. The witness, now a grown woman, told the court how she was adopted by Rick at age 10, after he noticed her at a Las Vegas charity event where he was a major sponsor. Then came nearly an hour of harrowing testimony. She described in heartbreaking detail how years of alleged abuse unfolded behind the closed doors of Rick's home. Emotional manipulation, threats, and coercion, carried out by both father and son. She said she tried to run away when she was 15, desperate for freedom. But Rick found her, spun a story to the cops about her being mentally unstable, and got her sent back home. After that, things only got worse. More control, tighter rules, less hope. But the most chilling moment? It came when she repeated a line Rick once said to her, a warning she'd never forget. He told me, "No one will believe you. I'm Rick Harrison. You're nobody." That line hit the courtroom like a slap. It wasn't just cold, it was calculated. But this time, she came prepared. What the public didn't know was that this witness hadn't just survived, she'd documented everything. For years, she'd quietly gathered proof, handwritten diaries, voice recordings, screenshots, even footage copied from Rick's own security cameras. She told the court she had backed it all up on a hard drive and brought that drive with her to court. That single piece of evidence flipped the entire trial on its head. What started as a case about shady money deals and smuggled antiques was suddenly something much darker. Now, it's about child abuse, exploitation, control. The courtroom's focus shifted overnight from financial fraud to a potentially massive criminal investigation involving a minor. The prosecution wasted no time. After her testimony, the lead attorney announced they were preparing to expand the charges if the evidence holds up under forensic review. Rick's legal team has stayed mostly silent, only saying that their client denies all allegations unrelated to the original financial case. But outside the courtroom, the world was watching and reacting. A video clip of the exact moment she uttered those 5 devastating words, "They took turns on me," went viral within hours. The hashtag number "They took turns on me" exploded, appearing over 3 million times in less than 8 hours. Celebrities, child safety groups, and activists started speaking out, demanding justice and full protection for the woman who stepped into court and spoke her truth. Legal experts now say this trial is no longer just about money. It's becoming something much, much bigger. What started as a money laundering case had now exploded into something no one saw coming, a deep, twisted criminal investigation involving alleged child abuse. When this all began, folks were expecting tax records and shady deals. Not this. Now, the question isn't just, did Rick Harrison move illegal cash? It's how much truth did he bury under the empire he built and protected for over a decade. Part 4. Evidence and Diaries. When the truth comes with files. The very next day, after the jaw-dropping testimony, the energy in the Clark County courtroom was electric. The jury and legal teams were called in early. The reason? Prosecutors had just filed a motion to officially expand the scope of the trial, and they had backup. Evidence. This wasn't just a stack of papers. It was a full-on digital bombshell. The witness, the adopted daughter, had turned over a hard drive. Not just any drive, but a 2-terabyte SSD packed with hundreds of files, handwritten journals, photos, voice memos, video recordings. She had spent years gathering this stuff, documenting her life inside the Harrison mansion. Every moment she wasn't allowed to speak, she wrote. Every night she felt afraid, she recorded. The first piece of evidence shown in court? That very hard drive, sealed and tagged. Inside were more than 400 files, all neatly organized, time-stamped, and labeled. Some included screenshots. Others were video clips from surveillance cameras that had been hidden inside the house. And here's the kicker. Several of those file names matched exactly with the events and dates she spoke about in her testimony. Clark County digital forensic experts reviewed the drive and confirmed it. No tampering, no edits, no funny business. The file data matched the original timestamps. Everything lined up with the security gear the family had installed. This wasn't just testimony anymore. This was evidence, real, raw, and verified. It turned out, Rick Harrison did have cameras hidden throughout his home, including secret ones he'd always claimed never existed. One of the most disturbing pieces of evidence? A video clip kept confidential to protect the victim's identity. It was shown privately to the judge, and it said more than words ever could. In the footage, the girl sat alone in her room, her eyes flicking again and again toward one corner of the ceiling. Investigators later confirmed what she had sensed. An ultra-mini camera was hidden inside a fake smoke detector aimed right at her. Her nervous glances, her body language, the tension in her face, it all matched up with the trauma signs documented in her earlier medical reports. But that wasn't all. A 176-page handwritten diary was also entered into evidence. It had been kept in pristine condition, stored safely, and experts confirmed it showed natural aging, not something made up last minute. A handwriting analyst confirmed it was all hers. The prosecution called it a timeline of torment because every entry lined up perfectly with the digital files. She didn't just write down how she felt. She logged the when, the what, and even the exact time of everything that happened. One diary entry stood out. July 22nd, 2015. Rick came in after dinner. He said no one would ever love me like he and Corey. He turned the living room speakers up very loud. I knew tonight would not be a good night. And like clockwork, the video footage confirmed it. That exact night, Rick was in the bedroom area for 47 minutes, right after the house sound system had been cranked up. Every word, every timestamp, every action she described had backup. Home security data confirmed it all, and the prosecution wasn't done. They followed with a string of voicemail messages and emails between Rick and Corey. What those messages revealed would only push this case further into darkness. One message from Corey Harrison, sent at 2:14 a.m., read, "Your turn tonight." That short sentence sent chills through the courtroom. Rick's defense team scrambled to explain it away, calling it a joke, maybe a harmless note about taking turns with house chores or family duties. But with everything already on the table, the diary, the footage, the witnesses' words, nobody in the room was buying that excuse. Then came what many are calling the most devastating piece of evidence so far, an 18-second audio recording recovered from the witness's old phone. In the clip, a man's voice, identified as Rick Harrison, can be heard saying, "You should consider yourself lucky. We adopted you. If you were still in the system, you'd be passed around like trash." That one line shattered any remaining illusions. Independent voice experts from UCLA ran the clip against known recordings of Rick's voice. The match came back at over 96% certainty. No denying it. But the prosecution wasn't finished. More witnesses were brought to the stand. One was Gloria Mendoza, a housekeeper who worked for the Harrisons between 2014 and 2016. Her voice trembled as she told the jury about the day she accidentally walked into a room and saw Rick and his adopted daughter in a compromising situation. She said the girl looked frozen, pale, paralyzed with fear, while Rick stood shirtless, just watching. Gloria quit soon after that, but never filed a report. Why? She said she was scared of being sued, blacklisted, or losing everything. Another witness, Brett Cummings, a delivery driver, was called in next. He testified that while making an evening delivery to the Harrison home, he accidentally left his phone recording. What it picked up was bone-chilling. A scream, followed by a desperate voice pleading, "Please, not again!" Las Vegas forensic audio experts later confirmed the authenticity of the clip. Experts confirmed the scream on the delivery driver's recording was real. No edits, no manipulation. It was raw, authentic, and chilling. Then came the testimony of Dr. Elizabeth Connors, a respected forensic psychologist specializing in PTSD. After extensive evaluations, she confirmed that the witness's mental health profile perfectly matched the symptoms seen in long-term, closed-environment sexual abuse cases. She listed the signs: dissociation, memory blackouts, severe anxiety, insomnia. All of it consistent with sustained trauma over years. The courtroom hung on every word. At this point, the case was no longer about financial crimes. Legal experts agreed. Laundering money? That was just the surface. The real story was something much deeper and far more sinister. The witnesses' legal team formally submitted all evidence to the FBI, pushing for a full federal investigation, not just into Rick Harrison, but into the possibility of a broader, organized network tied to abuse and exploitation. Then came a twist from inside the entertainment world. A television producer, someone who worked behind the scenes, spoke out. They said Rick repeatedly refused to allow his adopted daughter to appear on screen. He'd always brush it off, saying, "She doesn't like the camera." But after everything that surfaced in court, that line now carries a dark, gut-wrenching meaning. Part 5. Corey's Breakdown. April 18th. Courtroom 3, Clark County Courthouse. The next person called to testify was none other than Corey Harrison, Rick's biological son and the public face set to inherit the Pawn Stars legacy. Until then, Corey had been silent, sitting beside his father, stone-faced, always there, never speaking. But now, with his adopted sister's brutal testimony echoing through the courtroom and evidence stacking sky-high, the defense had no choice. They had to change their game plan. And Corey was about to take center stage. "You're certain this was about the pawn shop?" the prosecutor pressed, locking eyes with Corey. The silence that followed stretched painfully. Nearly 20 seconds of tension so thick you could feel the courtroom holding its breath. Then, suddenly, Corey snapped. "I have no idea what she's talking about. She's always been complicated, confusing, and making things up." His voice cracked, and a few jurors exchanged uneasy glances. One even turned away, while whispers rippled through the gallery. That's when the prosecution dropped the next blow. A new audio recording. In it, Corey's voice could clearly be heard saying, "She's at it again. Maybe I need to teach her another lesson." The clip had been secretly recorded by a pen-shaped device planted by a housekeeper, who later quit the job after feeling something was deeply wrong in the house. She testified that the chilling comment came the same evening their adopted sister had cried herself to sleep. As the clip played, Corey lost control. He jumped to his feet, shouting, "She's a liar! I fed her, clothed her, educated her!" The judge slammed the gavel, trying to restore order, while Corey's lawyer quickly demanded a 10-minute recess. When the proceedings resumed, the courtroom felt heavier. Corey slumped in his chair, speaking only when forced to, his eyes fixed on the floor, no longer trying to defend with confidence. Then came the knockout blow. A personal diary entry found during a search of Corey's home. Confirmed to be in his handwriting, it read, "I don't know how this will end. Sometimes I think it's gone too far, but now I'm just afraid. Afraid she'll talk." As those words echoed through the courtroom, no one dared speak. Corey sat frozen. Rick stared blankly at the table in front of him. The prosecutor asked no further questions because he didn't need to. Later, a forensic psychologist from UNLV concluded that Corey showed no signs of remorse, only panic. And that fear of being exposed, they said, was exactly what made the witness's story even more believable. The backlash was immediate and brutal. Outrage exploded online as former fans turned their disappointment into action. Old clips of Corey making crude jokes on Pawn Stars, once brushed off as harmless banter, were now being reshared under captions like, "We thought this was playful." People weren't laughing anymore. At the same time, a former crew member from Pawn Stars, speaking anonymously to the Las Vegas Review-Journal, revealed what many had feared. Rick was known for controlling every second of the show's content, but Corey had a different kind of reputation. He made female staff uncomfortable. No one dared report it. They were scared of losing their jobs. That same night, an NBC columnist published a scathing piece titled, "Corey Harrison is more than an accused." It painted Corey as the symbol of a generation raised in luxury but blind to morality, treating others, especially vulnerable people, like they were possessions instead of human beings. When Corey finally stepped down from the witness stand, he left without a word. No nods, no support, nothing. Even Rick avoided eye contact. The adopted daughter sat silently, watching him. One reporter described her expression not as angry, but as something deeper. A quiet stare of someone who had just watched her abuser be exposed to the world, without having to say a thing. The lead prosecutor made it clear, Cory's testimony didn't weaken the case. It made it stronger. His words, his reactions, even his breakdown served as indirect proof of a bigger system of control, secrecy, and guilt. One more blow came when prosecutors added a fresh charge, witness intimidation. Emails from Cory to former staff surfaced, pleading with them to keep everything we saw quiet. The trial isn't over. More witnesses are coming. But legal experts already agree. Whatever wall the Harrison family tried to build around themselves, Cory just knocked it down for good. Just hours after Cory Harrison's explosive testimony, the fallout hit like a tidal wave, spilling far beyond the courtroom. What started as a quiet Nevada trial had now become a cultural earthquake, shaking the very core of American reality TV. That same day, the History Channel, home to Pawn Stars since 2009, released a statement. Carefully worded but impossible to ignore. All episodes of Pawn Stars are suspended across all platforms pending the court's final ruling. And with that, everything unraveled. Streaming platforms moved fast. Hulu, YouTube TV, Amazon Prime, they all pulled Pawn Stars from their catalogs. Within 48 hours, the show was wiped from every major service. Then came the merch purge. T-shirts, mugs, even Rick Harrison action figures vanished from Walmart and Target shelves almost overnight. But that wasn't the end. The Federal Tax Division stepped in, freezing over a dozen bank accounts tied to Rick. Investigators launched a full-scale audit of every gold and silver pawn shop transaction from 2015 to 2022, digging into years of financial records. While the money trail shook the foundation, the real collapse was something deeper, the fall of the Harrison family brand. For years, they'd been seen as a wholesome slice of Americana, funny, hardworking, relatable. But now, that image was exposed as nothing more than a polished performance. A former editor from the show stepped forward, revealing the truth behind the scenes. Rick reviewed every single episode before it aired. He oversaw the cuts, approved every word, and even tweaked scripts, especially scenes involving Cory or his late father. Old man, everything had to feel funny, warm, and family-friendly. But now, the mask was off. And what America thought was real turned out to be a carefully staged illusion. They were once the picture-perfect American TV family, but leaked internal documents revealed it was all crafted, a carefully built image designed to hook middle-aged viewers. The dynamic was scripted. Rick as the stern but wise father, Cory as the reckless son always learning lessons, and Richard Old Man Harrison as the grumpy, no-nonsense grandpa. What viewers didn't know? There was more to the family, hidden entirely from the spotlight. A daughter no one ever mentioned, and an estranged eldest son, Adam Harrison, Rick's firstborn from an earlier relationship who broke his silence online. I cut ties with Dad in 2017. I don't know everything, but I'm not surprised. With that, the internet started digging. Old rumors, once laughed off or dismissed, were being looked at again. One quote from a 2013 crew member resurfaced. "They only act like a family when the cameras roll. Off camera, they barely speak unless they have to." Back then, it sounded petty. Now, it sounded like truth. Even the gold and silver pawn shop, the real-life heart of the show, couldn't hold on. 3 days after the home surveillance scandal broke, the store announced a temporary closure, claiming it was for the safety of staff and the public. Fans turned fast. On TripAdvisor, the shop's glowing 4.8 rating sank to 2.1 in just days. Reviews shifted from great experience to sickening betrayal. People were furious that they had once looked up to the Harrisons, called them role models. One former employee told BuzzFeed News anonymously, "Working for the Harrisons felt like hitting the jackpot. Now I realize it was all just theater." Nothing real behind the scenes. And outside the pawnshop world, things were only getting worse. As the fallout deepened, the public began to peel back the layers of the Harrison legacy, and what they saw shocked them. Every on-screen moment, every touching interaction with customers, every family laugh or emotional beat, it had all been planned, polished, and edited like a scripted TV drama. The truth? It wasn't a real family, it was a brand. And that brand was built to hide something much darker. Behind the smiles and the antiques, it was a machine. One designed to distract from the cracks, the control, the manipulation, and the silence behind closed doors. It wasn't about love. It was about image. And when that image finally shattered, what was left behind looked nothing like the family America thought it knew. Part 7. Crimes Disguised. When the Rick Harrison scandal blew up, the same haunting question kept echoing, not just in the courtroom, but all over social media and news outlets across the country. How did this happen? How could a man so widely adored, a symbol of work ethic, humor, and heart, commit or cover up years of abuse without anyone noticing? The harsh truth? The answer doesn't lie with Rick alone. It lies with us, the viewers. We watched. We shared his quotes, we bought the merch, we laughed at his one-liners with Chumlee, and grinned during those heartfelt moments with the old man. We believed the image he sold because we wanted to believe it. It was easier that way. Blind loyalty to celebrities isn't new. Whether it's movie stars accused of violence or politicians caught in scandal, time and time again, the public has chosen comfort over truth. And far too often, the victims are the ones blamed for breaking the illusion. The Rick Harrison case stands as one of the most unsettling scandals in recent TV history. He wasn't a movie star or a global icon. He was something more intimate. The relatable, down-to-earth guy from your favorite reality show. A familiar face in middle-class living rooms. Approachable, wisecracking, and just old school enough to be trusted. He wasn't flashy. He was reliable. That's what made the betrayal cut even deeper. So when his adopted daughter stepped forward with disturbing accusations, many didn't question Rick, they questioned her. Social media lit up with predictable pushback. She just wants money. Why now? She was never on the show. This feels off. And the most chilling of all, Rick's a good man. TV doesn't lie. These weren't cruel attacks. They were knee-jerk defenses, people trying to protect the version of reality they'd believed in for years. It wasn't just Rick's image on trial. It was their memories, their comfort, their trust in what had always felt safe. Dr. Laura Kim, a media psychologist at Stanford, explained it best. We don't admire celebrities. We admire the stories they represent. And when those stories fall apart, so does part of our own identity. Pawn Stars wasn't just a show. It was a habit, a tradition, a symbol of father-son lessons, small business values, and harmless laughs. So when it crumbled, it wasn't just a scandal. It felt like a betrayal of American nostalgia itself. But the deeper danger comes when fame is paired with unchecked control. Rick wasn't just the face of a pawn shop. He was the one shaping every storyline, editing every moment, deciding who made the cut, and protecting his image at all costs. He didn't just manage a business, he managed a narrative, one that millions trusted until the truth tore it apart. No one, not the cast, not the crew, had the power to challenge what happened beyond the camera. Rick's adopted daughter, now the trial's most crucial witness, had once been completely invisible to the media. That wasn't a slip. It was intentional. A calculated erasure. And the public? Too caught up in the TV fantasy to ever ask why a man who constantly preached family values never showed his whole family. But this story goes beyond Rick Harrison. It exposes a system where fame buys silence, and influence shields people from the consequences of their actions. In a world where followers count more than facts, influencers, and TV personalities are trusted without question, while victims, especially those without privilege or power, are picked apart even when they bring receipts, witnesses, and hard evidence. As journalist Elijah Monroe wrote in The Atlantic, Rick Harrison isn't an outlier. He's just the most visible symptom of a system built to protect the powerful. And that raises the real question. How many more Ricks are out there? Not just on reality TV, but in TED Talks, viral clips, podcasts, self-help empires, people commanding absolute trust, hiding behind polished personas, never held accountable. The Rick Harrison trial might end in a matter of weeks, but its shadow will stretch far beyond the courtroom. It's not just a turning point for the victim, not just a test for the justice system. It's a wake-up call for all of us, a chance to rethink how we idolize fame, how easily we confuse likability with truth, and how dangerously fast we dismiss those who speak out. By the final day of the trial, no one was even talking about money laundering anymore. Antiquities smuggling and money laundering, once the headline-grabbing center of the case, had faded into the background. The spotlight now belonged to Rick Harrison's adopted daughter, the person he kept hidden for over a decade. After 3 days on the stand, hundreds of pages of documents, digital files, and a long line of witnesses, she had done the impossible. She tore down the myth of the Harrison family. What she gave the world wasn't a made-for-TV storyline. There was no theme music, no edits, no clever dialogue, just raw fragments of memory, stitched together with pain, trauma, and truth. And when she stepped off the witness stand for the final time, she didn't look back at Rick. She didn't search the jury's faces. She just walked out, slow and silent, like someone finally escaping a prison built from silence. Outside, a crowd of reporters waited. She said nothing, but her attorney spoke one line that echoed louder than anything else. She does not want pity. She wants to be believed. That one sentence said it all. This trial was never just about one man. It was about a culture that glorifies fame so blindly, it buries the truth when it's inconvenient. Rick Harrison hadn't been found guilty yet, but the collapse had already begun. Sponsorships were gone. Pawn Stars was officially canceled, and the carefully crafted image of America's pawn shop family shattered. His name was stripped from every list that once celebrated him as America's everyman. The public didn't need a court sentence to end his career. It ended the moment the applause stopped, the moment trust vanished. The fall of Rick Harrison wasn't marked by prison bars, it was marked by silence. But the real conclusion doesn't belong to him. It belongs to us, the audience, the fans, the followers who once believed every slick line, every fatherly lesson, every edited scene. We turned his catchphrases into memes. We shared his jokes. We helped build the myth. And now we're left with one hard question. Why were we so willing to believe? Her voice, the one he tried to erase, rose above the courtroom walls. It traveled far beyond the TV screen and forced the world to ask, in this age of idol worship and personal branding, who are we ignoring? Who are we silencing without even knowing it? I refused to die in silence, and today, I did not. Those were her final words in court. And now, they've become a rallying cry across the internet. Not a cry for pity, a banner of survival. She is no longer the hidden girl. She is the voice that shattered a lie millions believed. The court will make its ruling, but the moral verdict has already landed. And it isn't just about Rick, it's about all of us, the ones who knew, the ones who doubted, and the ones who stayed quiet. If her story moved you, don't let it fade. Like, share, subscribe, let her voice keep echoing.